Thank you everyone for joining us for ICMI 2021, a live Q&A with Dean Hedges. He just revealed to us 3 stories that was such, I couldn't imagine going through some of the things that Dean has gone through, but basically being accused of rape as a weapon to try to get him to do what that woman wanted, both of those women. And then just being accused of stalking because someone got tired of talking to him. So here's our opportunity to ask Dean some more questions. And while we wait for the questions to come in, let's go ahead and start with a nice softball question. What do you think of ICMI this year?
Well, this is my first ICMI, so it's the best one I've ever seen. It's just jam-packed full of fantastic and wonderful, enlightening presentations and access. Yeah, I'm delighted with the whole thing. Haven't gotten a whole lot of sleep in the past couple of days, so I didn't want to miss any of them.
I mean, I've just seen, your presentation, your interview and everything, and all 3 stories. And after you've gone through such things, compared to those times, do you think you're in a much better place right now?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's great to be able to look back. These happened years ago, so it's great to be able to look back and, well, first of all, to see what you actually sailed through, what you actually got through, and there were certainly times when it wasn't particularly pleasant, and really downright overwhelming. I mean, at one time, I was completely overcome. But I would say for anybody who's going through that in their own way, that to imagine looking ahead that you will get through it, and years later that we're like, it's almost like we're children, and our injuries hurt and it's traumatic, but later on we get to share the scars and say, look what I went through and made through. I certainly wouldn't have had any of the compassion and understanding for other people's ordeals if I hadn't gone through my own.
And what would you tell to someone who might have gone through something similar you did? Like, what is the path of recovery they can take?
Well, I'd say the most important thing is self-care. In situations of prolonged and great stress, you've got to make sure that you eat well, that you sleep well. I have to tip my hat to Valium. Carefully used Valium was very helpful. When I was too upset to sleep, just a half of a Valium was all I needed to be able to get restorative sleep. I'm not a marijuana smoker, so maybe that would be good for someone else. And to look at the long game, see that this is something that will end, that you will get through. And obviously, being an innocent person, staying innocent, is a good handhold. It's a good standard, to be able to lean against.
Because one thing that I'm noticing in your bio is that you're, aside from playing music, didn't you say you also worked on films?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so about that, before I let you answer, it seems like your early part of your life is pretty adventurous and fulfilling, and even that, having taken that in consideration, you weren't immune to the things you went through afterwards. So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, could you say more on that?
Well, I think that anyone really can be exposed to these kinds of horrors. I don't know if my careers affected them, or they're certainly affected by them. I certainly withdrew a great deal, and in terms of that last experience with Liz, yeah, I didn't want to work for anybody after that. But
it's hard to. I want to encourage people to ask questions because so many of us have been through similar things as Dean has, and he certainly has a lot more than the three stories that he's told. I mean, it is a real testament to who Dean is that he is still standing and here to talk to us about this. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, it's like we come into this movement because something happened to us. And certainly the same with Dean. And we need to understand what these are so we can try to prevent other people from going through the same thing. And especially with that stalking case, it didn't matter what his side of the story was. Everyone had already made up their mind. And this is a very real challenge that we face. So I encourage everyone to just go ahead and ask some questions about some of the things that Dean faced that we didn't cover in there. So what would you say is the big issue within the men's movement that you're most focused on?
Well, I would say probably the underlying denominator is validity. That the big obstacle seems that it's the empathy gap. Really, it's just that even when we share our difficulties and describe our troubles, they are not really recognized as either we're not valid or the situation isn't valid, and certainly not enough for legislators and policymakers to adapt change. This is a huge, we're pushing on this rock really hard, and the leverage just isn't there. It's amazing.
And now that you've made it into the men's movement, what are some new issues you've kind of picked up along the way that you've been kind of gained a renewed sense of concern over? Something you haven't thought of before?
Well, I think the circumcision issue was new. I was circumcised, and I spent my whole life like that, so I just didn't really recognize it as an issue. It's just always the way I've been. So, finding out that might have been a source of trauma, or certainly for others, that was new. I think that was a new aspect in our lives. I've learned a lot about the whole gender issue dynamic, all of the different aspects in which both men are wonderful in, and also ones that they're discriminated in. And, it really does make us apparently, as a demographic, a lot more amazing, a lot more wonderful. We're running it at highway speeds, carrying all kinds of weight at the same time. Now, I love that expression with, that women hold up half the sky, but we're kind of like holding up the women who are holding up half the sky. So it's
and certainly the sky itself. It's as almost if women are not holding the sky up at all. It just looks like they are.
Right. It certainly wouldn't fall if they let go. But one of the things I see is that it's easy to confuse and conflate like women and feminism, and I think a lot of times the men's rights people could get a bad rap because we tend to vent a little bit our frustration, and that may appear as misogyny. I spend a lot of time on the internet and on Facebook, and I get called names pretty much on a regular basis, and it's usually if a feminist calls me a misogynist, it's usually because I'm treating her as an equal, and they're just not accustomed to that.
So, audience questions.
Go ahead. Hit me up.
Well, do you have plans of what you want to do in the men's movement? Would you like to talk more about what you've gone through, or is there any sort of protest that you might want to be a part of, or anything else that's going on in your life that you think relates to men's issues?
Well, yeah, I do want to be more active, and I've been watching the whole thing, and it would be nice to be a little more involved. I've done a little bit. Obviously, it's not enough. The unfair and the imbalance between domestic violence services would be a good start. We have, I'd asked one of the speakers about, we have victims advocates, but we don't have respondent advocates. So I would think there should be, that should be supplied. If somebody's being accused of a crime or having to respond to a complaint, there should be an advocate alongside, so that one side has advocacy, the other side has advocacy. Right now, victims advocates get to call people victims before they're actually even determined to have become victims. And, one of the things that sounds simple enough, but when you go into court, the defendants are on one side and the prosecution is on the other, and it's always the same side. I'd like to see a flip of the coin, so that a judge would never become accustomed to the defendant always being on one side and the prosecution always being on the other. It would keep, it would make it a little more unavailable to bias.
Nowadays, what do you do to keep yourself kind of uplifted and optimistic?
Well, that's a hard question. Well, the serious stuff, the really serious stuff, you have to take with some humor. Otherwise, it just becomes unbearable. Physical activity is very helpful. I deal with boats, and I had mentioned to you earlier that I have a classic wooden rowboat, which I made available for guys to go out and burn off some steam, go for a row instead of getting into a domestic violence situation, with a wife or a girlfriend. You can just go out and burn off some steam. And that was kind of interesting, because I got a lot of negative feedback from wives/girlfriends who felt that it was wrong that I wasn't offering it to them as well. So, for guys, I think activity is a very helpful management skill. Get out and do something, learn to play trumpet, take up boating, or when I was going through the worst of it, I did a great
Dean?
Yep.
Your voice has actually been going down lower and lower as time has passed on. Now we can barely hear you at all.
Really? That's odd. Is that
That's a lot better. Yes.
Yeah, now it is. Yeah.
I had my hand over the microphone when I was holding the phone. Sorry.
So what were you saying?
Oh, just in terms of managing the stress, having physical activities is very helpful. When I was going through the worst of it, I did a great deal of walking. I had this circuit. I used to walk around Lake Union, which is about 7 miles.
So why do you think, and I apologize if this is insulting, but why do you think it was so easy for you to kind of fall into these traps? And what I mean by that is, we grew up to believe that, if we were just loyal, dutiful men, good things would happen to us, but it actually worked against you. And I'm curious as to why do you think that was?
Well, it is a good question. I think it's important to take, to have a certain agency and responsibility in your life, even for things that may have not, that, that you may not have directly created. I think I tend to be a very available person, and that may have allowed me to ignore warning signs that should have been listened to. In the case with Liz, she was abused as a child, and when she shared that information with me, and it endeared me to her. Or now I know that it may have been wiser for me to, keep some distance. The abused people have a habit of becoming the abuser. So, this is the cycle of violence. I didn't know about it at the time, so I was an easy mark, I suppose. Which would happen to anybody who leads with their heart. I don't fault myself for it, but I'm wiser from it.
Yeah, I understand. So Carl Palmer actually has a question. Thanks for your courage and honesty, Dean. The theme I see running through the three stories is the demands of the women, their expectation you would comply to, the huge leap to irrational punishment via the police, and the complete lack of empathy for the destruction they would cause. All three women seem mentally unwell, yet are those types of behaviors becoming the norm these days?
I don't know. It's a great question. I think, exposing the experiences that I had may help, bring some of the guys out of the woodwork who either didn't recognize that it was abusive behavior or just, fluffed it off, which is really easy to do. We love, as guys, we love to enjoy what we can go through. And I think that certainly with the feminist ideology of being a perpetual victim, it would become popular, if it's not already popular, to filter in victimization, even when it's not there. Maybe you could call it the Jussie Smollett syndrome. What he did was wrong. A lot of women do these things, and it's probably based on the fact that they feel like victims, so they must have been somehow victimized. And also, everyone will listen to that. I went to a talk, and the woman who had, accused somebody of sexually assaulting her commented that if someone had stolen her purse, they would have believed her more than when she reported being sexually assaulted. What I find interesting is that's because people rarely falsely accuse somebody of stealing their purse. And as it turns out, this talk was by someone who did, in fact, falsely accuse. And that was the, not Brian Banks, but it was the basis for the movie The Hunting Grounds. And her name was Camilla Wellingham, and Brandon Wilson was the fellow that she falsely accused. And they were both going to Harvard Law School at the time. He was kicked out and eventually was reinstated and got his degree.
Okay, so we've got an anonymous question. Question for all of you. Do you believe in the shit sticks theory? For example, on falsely accused, a male is accused of a sex crime which he did not do. It is 100% proved he did not do it, but because of the accusation, society is always weary of him as a sexual predator. Hence, shit sticks. And I'll go ahead and answer this first, but definitely the two of you give your responses. For me, yes, this absolutely happens. Part of it is the distrust of the legal system. When the legal system convicts someone, hey, justice has been served, but that same justice, if they say someone didn't do something, oh, the justice system's corrupt. So in their opinion, and a lot of feminists will say that it's better for 100 innocent men to go to jail than for one guilty man to go free. So it is very much shit sticks. You know, you're always guilty. You're guilty by accusation alone. Because, and it's like in Dean's case. I mean, yeah, he got an acquittal, but it's always going to be on his record that, not acquittal, I apologize. I keep mixing up those words. But yes, I mean, he got the charges dropped, but it's still going to be on his record that he was accused of this. And any law enforcement that see it is going to be biased against him of, oh, he's a stalker. So it's an unfortunate situation. It's something we need to change. But I even see this within the men's movement, in all honesty. We tend to take a all or nothing look like, oh, well, if someone's accused, it must mean they're guilty. We got to remember, it is innocent until proven guilty. Even Jesse Smollett had that right by the Constitution. Now, we all know that he did it, but he had a right to go into that trial as innocent until proven guilty, and he was proven guilty by a court system.
Yeah, I would add that with the Violence Against Women's Act, there's some parts to it which make it practically impossible, to have a fair view, or to be given a fair view.
You're soft again, Dean.
Oh, it's called the full faith. And, I at one point I had submitted an email to the judge, and she looked at the email, and the email would have cleared me, of wrongdoing. It was communication between me and my ex-girlfriend. And she looked at the email and then looked at me and said, Mr. Hedges, I don't believe you. And this was in the court. She could have certainly turned to my ex-girlfriend and say, did you send Mr. Hedges this email? She didn't even do that. She just automatically simply decided she doesn't have to believe it. And this is the full faith clause in the Violence Against Women's Act, which is, pretty much a guilty until proven innocent, and you can't prove yourself innocent anyway clause.
I don't have much to add to that one. I'm sorry, we've not finished, Dean?
No, I just want to make sure that the microphone worked.
Okay. Well, I don't have much more to add to that, with the exception of agreement. I am kind of reminded, false accusations of. I'm reminded of like the satanic panic of the 80s, in which daycare centers and such were given accusations of satanic child molestation accusations out of the blue, and a lot of the careers of these people running these daycares were ruined because of that, even if they weren't doing anything. That's just a small thing I was reminded of to add to this thing, but otherwise I am in agreement with both of you, and of course to the anonymous person who asked the question. Yeah,
I remember many years ago there was a church employee, a fellow who had been accused of molesting like a half a dozen girls in the basement of the church, and it turned out that no one had been abused. One one girl's mother had complained because the man had reprimanded the girl, and all the other girls just didn't want to get left out of the excitement, of whatever was going on. So they said, "Oh yeah, I was abused too." Anyway, the truth finally came out, but it was horrendous for the guy.
And I used to watch Law and Order SVU, but after a while, I just got so sick of it because it was like no matter what happened, it was usually men who were the rapists. And okay, large percentage seemed to be. That's not true, but that's what the perception is, and they're just modeling that. But it's like in many of the episodes, it was always about let's accuse everyone we can, let's destroy their lives, and sooner or later we will get the actual person. And there was no culpability on the cops' parts of, hey, we just destroyed this person's life because of this accusation. Nope, we got the person we wanted. That's all we care about. And that is really just a model of life itself, that it doesn't matter whose life we destroy in the process of justice, even if it's a false accusation. Because a lot of people look at it as, yeah, they might have been lying, but there has to be some truth. I mean, who would lie about rape? That's something I hear a lot from women. Like, what woman would knowingly lie about rape? As if it's the worst thing possible, and even worse is to lie about it, so no woman will do it. Well, we know for a fact women do it all the time. But yeah, we're men, we're cannon fodder, and that's just the simple truth.
Yeah, I remember doing some figuring out with the FBI's statistic of 8% false accusations of rape. And even at 8%, it was still more than the murdered people in Washington State for the sample year I picked, which was 2012. So yeah, even at 8%, it's a lot of false accusations, and 8% is really the lowest reliable percentage that we should consider, because the FBI report doesn't include cases which were later found to be false. It only included ones that were clearly and obviously false.
Well, I'm actually going to disagree with you there, Dean, because I also do a lot of research on this. And that 8% figure that the FBI comes up with actually is the 2 to 8% figure that Susan Brown Miller came up with in the 70s. And where did she get her source? It was an offhand comment from a task force that said, yeah, about 2 to 8% are like that. She wrote it in a book in the 70s, and everyone uses it as absolute fact. And I don't think that it really is the most reliable. I think it's a starting point, but I wouldn't say it's reliable. But the problem is it's extremely difficult to ascertain what was mistaken identity versus someone knowingly lying about it. Because more often than not, people who lie about it don't reveal it. And those that do, well, so... But you're absolutely right. Even at that 8%, a little thought exercise I do is that in any given year, it's about 80,000 people who are convicted of rape.
Right.
But a lot of feminists will say, oh, well, not everyone reports rape. So, okay, let's average that out to 100,000 and then say, well, 90% of people don't report their rape. Okay, 200,000. But of that, 8% are false accusation. What's 8% of 200,000? That's 16,000 people.
Right.
16,000 people that are wrongly accused of rape.
Yeah. And that 8% is the lowest possible. Yeah. And that 8% is the lowest percentage that could be considered.
It's certainly a possibility, but the rate could be much, much higher. The U.S. Air Force reported a rate of 60%.
Right.
So we won't ever really know the actual number. I'd say 8% is safe, but that's not based on any scientific backing.
Well, there is a way we can determine the exact percentage, and that would be if there were no false accusations for a couple of years, and then we could see the differential. So,
well, that'd be great, but how do we ensure there's no false accusations?
well, that would be their responsibility. You know, the love of honesty was all it would take to do.
So it looks like there's a comment in the chat. Do you want to read that, Vernon?
There's actually several comments in the chats. Which one were you referring to?
Well, it looks like Natalie posted something, then Carl Palm posted something.
Yeah. Natalie said that she was telling me that the McMartins was the 80s preschool of the Satanic Panic problem. And she says that they made a movie out of it, if memory serves, with James Woods. Let's see here. Carl Palmer says a lot of those accusations in the 70s were connected to false memories and implanted in therapy or the police interview. Both professions need to be mindful of how suggestible vulnerable people people are, and exercise caution with how they conduct interviews and sessions.
What do you think, Dean?
Yeah, especially children are very they can be given false memories quite easily.
Yeah.
So Lysander states, I've been raised thinking that love relationship is all that matters, and what was during a good part of my life. In some of the experiences I heard here, I found things in common with what I've heard 12 years ago. I have been really destroyed at this time, and it took me a decade to build back my life. At the same time, I learned to find my happiness in creating, not only in art, but in all I could build, so that my happiness don't rely on love. At the end, I found a happy love. But I think creating and building is really important for men, and that's a great way to heal.
Yeah. Sure. I would agree with that. You know, we're, as Warren Farrell said, you know, we're doing beings, not just human beings.
All right, let's get some more questions rolling in. We still got a good amount of time. And so, the questions, they all help, they're all exciting, and we've been getting some great conversations just happening right here. So it all helps, so get them rolling in.
Well, so Natalie asked if there's a psychological term that you know of as false memories. And confabulation, I guess, is a close enough term. It deals with false memories. I don't know about implanting false memories, but people who have false memories, that's called confabulation.
Sure. Another term I've heard is recovered memory. You know, it's like it's something I hear of a lot. Trying to planting suggestions, and it kind of manifests itself as like a formerly forgotten memory that you just recovered.
Right.
And very easy in those situations, people just to make up what they believe wants to be heard. So if a psychiatrist keeps saying you have repressed memories, they'll just start spouting off whatever they can to please what the therapist is saying. And this can be the samely done with the police. And in fact, I mean, there's a great documentary on Netflix called Making a Murderer. It's a very, very sad story, but in one instance, these police interviewed this 17-year-old boy who was a bit slow. And they carefully worded their questions and kept pressuring him to answer the way they wanted to. This is a very easy thing to do, especially if people feel like they just want to cooperate. Because they said, hey, you can have a lawyer. Well, most people have the mindset of, well, I'm not guilty, so I'm not going to get a lawyer. Get a lawyer. Do not talk to the police on your own. I don't care what you're there for the police for. Have a lawyer present, because the police are just trying to find someone to pin. They don't care about truth. They don't care about finding the right person. They care about signing off on it. The prosecutor wants to say, hey, I put someone away for this crime. Re-elect me.
Yeah, that's true. I happen to, I was very lucky. I had a public defender who was very effective, believed me, and was really wonderful.
I'm going to read a bit from the comments, the chat rather. Natalie says, I've been trying to think of that word of those that implanted for 8 years and no one can remember the word. Can you say irony? Carl Palmer says, yes, Elizabeth Loftus's work is on false memories. I just remembered. Yeah, that was the first thing I thought about when I was when I got to the part of your interview when you were, talking to the policeman. You just straight up said, yes, I telephoned who you telephoned, and that was enough for him, right?
Yeah.
So that part Chris says about have a lawyer, that rings true.
Yeah,
It's hard to know you need a lawyer at that point, because a lot of police, I apologize, Dana, I'll let you answer that in just a moment, but a lot of police will take the attitude of, well, you don't need a lawyer if you don't have anything to hide, and that's a wrong thing. But they will still be biased against you if you ask for a lawyer, and people kind of know that's why they don't ask for one.
When the police called me, when they started to investigate the stalking complaint, he'd asked me if I had called my ex-girlfriend, which, I admitted I had, because I figured they'd have phone records anyway. But he was actually pretty hostile. He wasn't interested in asking about, well, tell me your side of the situation. He yelled at me, he said I was the problem. Later on, when the case was dropped, and I went back to him to discuss investigating her for giving false and misleading information to the police, to him, he thought that he considered my interest in having her charged with giving false information and misleading information was proof that I actually had been stalking her. Like, it didn't make any sense to me, but he had such a closed mind and was not in the least bit interested in seeing any of the texts and emails and phone records, which cleared me, which this is why they dropped the charges, is there was just no case against me.
Do you think this police officer, you said he was very antagonistic, aggressive.
Yeah.
Did you think he had this sick gynocentric satisfaction that he's going to go, snag somebody for having done something naughty to a woman or something?
Well, yeah, I think that that what my ex-girlfriend had told him, that he accepted, with full faith, and that information was terrible, made me look awful. So, it was, I suppose, yes, that was his chivalry, that was his white knightness, and maybe that's what got him into the police force in the first place. I can't really fault him on that so much, but being unwilling to see contrary data, which was reliable, is problematic, and being completely unwilling to go back to the complainant and say, look, you've wasted police resources, you've wasted court time, what you did was wrong, and it is actually illegal, and we have to decide whether we're going to press charges against you or not. It would be helpful, because when people do wrong things, they don't necessarily have to be criminalized, but they should get enough negative reinforcement to not want to continue it.
And it kind of reminds me of the movie Gone Girl, which at first I didn't want to watch that film, but then I'm glad I did because it really strikes a chord in this moment that at the end of the movie, I mean, everyone believed she was dead. Like the cops believed she was dead and wanted to blame the boyfriend, and she set this whole thing up. But then she appears out of nowhere, and he asks a question to the police like, well, how could she, and I forget the exact circumstance, but it's like, how could she have done all of this? And the police said to him, man, just be happy your wife is back. Right. And it's like we could say, well, that's just fiction, right? And that's true to life. It's like just everything works out in the end. Why do we need to rock the boat? Why do we need to investigate further? And it really comes down to, and there's a recent report, I guess the UK or some European country wants to start tagging rapists by the gender they identify. So if a trans woman who was born male raped someone, then the police are going to record it as a woman raped someone, even if they have a penis. And this upsets so many feminists who've been pushing for the trans issue and gender identity. But the moment we say, okay, we're going to comply with you, we're going to mark this as a woman, oh, that's wrong, because we cannot say women do anything bad.
Yeah, Carl mentioned that Gone Girl was a a thriller of a movie. The other movie that's kind of similar to that with I think it was Kirk Douglas and Greta Scacchi was Presumed Innocent.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Yeah, I didn't work on that one, but I worked on another movie with Greta Scacchi, which is called Salt on Our Skin, which I recommend because it's an excellent soft movie if you wanted to introduce the corrosive effects of feminism on relationships. It's a movie that it's you could call it a chick flick, and I think that women would warm up to it, but it does show the harmful effects that feminism has on relationships. And it's a wonderful movie. The soundtrack is excellent. I highly recommend it, not just because I happen to work on it.
Not that you're biased. No. But I'm sure it's a good film, and I'll look out for it. If you could, because I'm probably going to forget, just send me that in Messenger sometime, and I'll see if I can find it. But I think we're going to call it an end at this point. We thank you for everyone who did ask questions, but we had a nice, fun conversation, and I thank you, Dean, for that.
Well, it's wonderful to be given the platform. It's wonderful to have lived through all that, and I'm available if anyone out there is going through a difficult time like this. I might be able to make it a little easier.
Well, I certainly go ahead.
No, I was just saying thanks for being here, Dean.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some reason why I went through that, and it's not just for the thrill of being miserable.
Well, no, I thank you for sharing your stories with us, and I'm glad you're in a place now that you can reflect upon it and find the lessons to learn in that to share with the rest of us, because we need to keep telling our stories. We need to keep putting it out there until people really start listening and say, wow, this is a very unjust and unfair system, and we need to change it from the ground up to make sure that justice is properly dealt with and people don't misuse it for their own political gain, especially women.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for all of the speakers and for everybody here.
Absolutely.
All right. So we're going to get going. Thank you again, everyone, and I hope everyone has a good day.
All right. Thanks, guys.